Hi, welcome back. Today we are working on phonemes. Phonemes are the mouth shapes used to express different syllables in speech. So when you say certain words, your mouth makes different shapes, and there are a specific set of shapes that are used regularly by animators to express different sounds. So I will show you a chart that is very helpful. This is the phoneme mouth chart. So as you can see, there are multiple mouths used to express very different sounds. If you are ever trying to do dialogue for a character, you will use these shapes to express words. Oftentimes there will be this many shapes used. Some animations will use more, some animations will use less. A lot of people will point out that in anime, where they just have an open mouth and a closed mouth animation, when they could be using this wide range. So each of these represents a different sound that comes out whenever you're saying a certain syllable. And so there's ah or ah, e, I or I, o, oo, which would also be like w or There's f or v. There's or p or b. There's l or la. And then there's just a basic like ah. Anything that happens when you're kind of keeping your mouth mostly closed. So I will go through, I made a small animation. I will go through and demonstrate the usage of this, and hopefully I don't get copyright striked because I borrowed some dialogue from Jack Torrance. So this is my example of taking a dialogue from something that already exists and using this to practice by, you can look at his mouth or you can do it yourself. I recommend looking in a mirror and doing this, and just seeing the way your mouth moves as you're saying things, really overemphasize what it is that you're saying to show where your mouth is going. So.
I'm just gonna bash your brains. I'm just gonna bash your brains.
Just really quick through, there's a few that are very dramatic, and then there are a couple of in-betweens in here just to make it more succinct. I went above and beyond what would probably be used, because this one and this one can be kind of used as the same. Here I have them all marked down. So we've got my a or ah, my b, p, a secondary, more extreme b, p, a ch or a j or a sh, an or an I, a s or a z or a g or a n or a s, an or an a second one of these. This one would be less of an because in an if you do this in the mirror, I'm just saying things and you can't see what I'm doing with my face. But if you did an to yourself, if you're doing an you would see the top teeth and not the bottom teeth. You're kind of pulling your teeth back when you do an So this is I think in my opinion, a better a sh or a ch or a j, a g or an I or an e or a ye or an I or an a, an o or a w. That would be after like a strong w, an or a w or an oo or a ku, another I or an a. Kind of like this, but this is more specific to like a more open mouth, so you wouldn't be able to do as many of these. You probably couldn't get away with a ye with your mouth that wide open. A d or an n, a k or a s, a th, and that's about all you can use this one for, is when your tongue is out. A f or a v, and an ol, and that's also about what that one would be used for. There wouldn't be anything else. Now, when you piece all these together, you can make people talk. You can make them say a lot of stuff with just these, however many drawings that is. Was that like 12? I went a little bit more in there. I have a couple duplicates for more specific scenarios. But really, if you want to make something work, I recommend that you look at yourself in the mirror, saying what it is that you're trying to convey, and really go for extreme, like maybe yell it, maybe don't yell it. but just overemphasize so you can really see which parts of your face are moving more. And this helps if you do it, like if you're doing a full facial animation, I would recommend that you also pay attention to your eyes and your eyebrows when you're speaking, because you can also change these mouth shapes very slightly to convey anger or happiness. You can squeeze emotions into these, so I could make this more smiley, like that. You know, like just very basic stuff where you if you just pay attention to the corners of your mouth or the lips or where the tongue is placed, even inside of your teeth, you can convey different emotions and get much more accurate to real life expression. When somebody's really seething, they would probably have their teeth closed for most of what they're saying if you've ever seen somebody really angry. Or if somebody's really excited, they probably open their mouth even more than they would. So just things to keep in mind with when you're conveying emotion as well. But these are more of the generic. I'll just give you another one of these. These are the very generic shapes that you would be using, and some of these are pretty close to each other. So I like mine better, but I'm also biased. If you're ever struggling with what you're trying to say and you really can't get the mouth shape down, or maybe the words are coming out too fast and maybe they're too tight together, and so if you use too many words or too many phonemes right next to each other, your mouth is moving too quickly for it to be realistic, I would recommend you focus in on the syllables that you're using. Just take the word, break it down into its syllables, and then figure out which of these syllables is important, and if they are similar enough, you can just hold that same mouth for a couple of frames. So for example, I have a frame hold here for 3 frames of a b or an just because for the pause of the sentence, of the delivery even, it made sense. And then I believe I have, so for a couple of these I have an in-between where it was still in the middle of a transition, and so these are almost identical, but just adding another in-between there kind of helps it flow a little bit better. Same with these two are pretty close too, but even that slight difference can help. I probably could have, these are pretty far from each other, so I could have done an in-between there, but you get the idea. So I also did a more simplistic version of these, where I have less frames, same drawings, but I just broke the frames down even less, so you can see that they really aren't that essential to mix up that much. I'm going to delete this. I'll do this one.
I'm just gonna bash your brains. I'm just gonna bash your brains.
So that one's a little more jittery because there's less frames. And I'll do this one.
I'm just gonna bash your brains. I'm just gonna bash your brains.
Which is a lot more fluid because there are more frames, and I did very specifically choose to fill in-betweens, like right here, so that it flows from one point to the other. When you're doing less frames, a trick that a lot of people will use is that they will tween. They will do puppet tweening with their animation so that things are still moving, but they don't necessarily need to be. But with that movement comes the trick of animation. I don't want to say that it's lazy. It's a beneficial tool to use when you do want to convey that movement without actually having to move. So, for example, right here, same drawing, it's just sliding across. But since it's happening so quickly, it doesn't really make that much of a difference, especially with them being the same syllables. So it's not changing anything, you're holding that anyway, but it helps with the flow into the next one without having to draw an in-between.
I'm just gonna bash your brains. I'm just gonna bash your brains.
So I also did like a stretch right there and right here. So I did a squash and a stretch and then a squash again, just to really emphasize that syllable of bah, bah, because he's settling into the b and then he's exploding into the ah. So taking those drawings and just manipulating them specifically so that you don't have to draw any extra stuff. So why do we do phonemes? Phonemes are used by animators so that they can take these generic drawings of the same mouths and plug them into where they're used. So you can take the mouth, take the drawing, and set it to a specific key or a name. For example, I changed the name of one of these. This is specific to my program, but you can change each frame to have a specific fill-in, and so if I were to go here and I typed in A, it'll fill in the whatever the phoneme I assigned to that sound, which would really speed up the process of animation if you're doing dialogue like that. So that's usually when an animator would do that, is if they're trying to save time and it's really not that important what the dialogue is saying. You don't have to go through and, you don't have to do in-betweens for each mouth, because that would be a time killer, which is why you see in so many animes people don't do that often. They'll do it for an important scene, but for just basic filler dialogue, they don't care. Overall, phonemes are used as a tool for animators so that they don't have to go overboard. They can just take the basics, and in a crunch, they can fill them in, and it really does do a lot of the heavy lifting. If it's more intense and it's asked of you, when there's an emotional scene, then you might go in and you might hand draw each mouth. But for the most part, for basic dialogue in a neutral setting, these are the only shapes you'll need. And just for fun, I included some eyes so you can see how these work with the mouths, and how you can, if you were to see this in a dialogue, how just very subtle. I only have 3 eye drawings, but these different mouths really express what's happening better than the eyes would, and it saves so much time.
I'm just gonna bash your brains in.
Super easy. Now, if I really wanted to, I could go in and I could edit the eyes, make them slide around, whatever, give them a head, move that around with the mouth and the action. Not doing the full acting, just for the mouths to show you how a phoneme would work. So, I think that's all I got for you today. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. Join my Discord. I'll help you out. Hope you learned something. See you next time. Have a good day.